what I wanted to show you here is our staging area. What you see here is houses that are ready to ship. Okay, so once we pull material and do all the milling that we need to on the logs, they go in a bay out here, and this is what's ready to ship to the job site. We do ship in stages, so the builder can take the first floor system and logs, get that up, and then we'll ship another truckload of material. The finished material goes last, so it's staying under cover, away from the weather as long as possible before it gets out to the job site. I guess I'll answer one question that often comes up when we do tours, and that is, how long does the process take from when you walk in here at Beaver Mountain to when we could ship a house? And generally what we would tell people is, 8 to 12 weeks is probably average. We certainly can ship a house if you were to come in with all your ducks in a row in 4 to 6 weeks if it's a smaller package. But that kind of gives you an idea of the time frames that we're generally working with when people are showing up to begin with, and when we're shipping houses. All right, the next thing we're going to do is take a walk in the building and look at a few of the shops. This is our panel shop. It's in this shop that we pre-cut rafters and build any of the framed walls that we're providing as a panel. You can see on the table here we've got an example of what our panel would look like with the 2x6 plates, studs, and 2x10 headers. We are providing panelized, as an alternative to log. We can panelize as much or as little as you're interested in having panelized. Even with a log house, generally the second floor walls, the gable walls and the dormers would be a framed wall, not a log wall. Although they could be log, but certainly more efficient as far as getting the material up if they are framed. But they would be coming in a stack, something like this. The plywood has not been installed on this panel yet, just to give you an idea what it looks like. But this is generally what we're using for sheathing nowadays. It is 1/2-inch sheathing with a 1/2-inch of rigid insulation, which helps out as far as energy codes. All right, we're going to head right back out the door to the next shop. This is our component shop. In this shop, we are cutting timbers and siding and the false corners that we supply. Any of the logs that we supply, we also provide a siding and a log corner for the framed walls that matches the logs, so you really can't tell the difference as you're looking at the house. It all looks the same. You do have the crisscross corners up in the framed walls as well. We would also provide those for a garage, an attached garage, that would generally be framed as well. So we'll take a walk down through here and take a look at some of the material that we're working on right now. These are timbers for a house that's going to be shipping pretty soon. They are posts and ceiling timbers. These happen to be 8x8 hand hewn. You can see the finish on these is a little bit different than we're going to see as we keep walking through the shops here. One of the things that we're going to be providing is a buck system for the windows and doors, and this is an example of that up on the wall here. You can see there's a 2-inch wide frame for the sides and the top, and then the bottom is actually cut out of the log itself. And that is splined and caulked and placed in the opening in the log wall, and the window or door actually is installed in that opening. What this does is allows the logs to move, and it doesn't pinch the windows or the doors. We do cut siding in this shop, and the siding is cut right over here. And what we'll do with siding is we will end trim the siding so it's ready to be used by the contractor, but we're also going to be cutting out any defects. So the contractor really has very little waste to deal with. Really the only waste that would happen on the job site is when the contractor's taking the siding and putting it up in a gable, where the gable has the pitch of the roof, so there's just a little bit of siding that's cut off in a case like that, but the rest of the siding is going to be able to be butt together and just installed. We got an example of a railing post here. This happens to be a 6x6 railing post that we're going to be supplying for a house. If we take a look over on the wall back here, there's some examples of the timber floor joist systems that we have available, and it also is going to show you how those timbers are notched into the log wall. In the top row here we have what's marked as a wall tie. That's a 10-inch diameter lathe turned that is notched into the wall, and you can see down here an example of what that notch looks like. And on the floors are the different jigs that are used for the different size joists. We also have a 6x8 machine round bottom and a 6x8 square and 8-inch diameter examples of second floor joists on the wall here. Behind me over here are some of those bucks that I talked about for the buck system. And you can see it's a 2-inch by 7.5-inch piece of wood here that is grooved for the splines that are going to help protect the house from any infiltration of water or air. Down here is an example of our 8x8 square material. This is actually what the material looks like before it is hand hewn. Any of the timbers that we're cutting in this shop are coming in on this end, and they're being graded and cut to length based on a cut sheet, which is standing on the easel here. And you can take a look up on the wall behind is a timber truss, an example of a timber truss, and that happens to be hand hewn as well. We can do either round or square timber trusses. We got a stack of lumber here that is actually drop-offs from going through the pile and cutting the timbers that are necessary for a house. But you'll see as we keep going through the other shops, there's some stacks of these. This actually is not waste because we're going to be reusing this, recutting this down into either spindles or railing posts or runners or stickers for shipping. Anything that's waste goes in the bin. You can see there's very little waste actually in the bin. That actually we will put out by the road, and people stop by and pick it up for firewood. And it doesn't last very long. Sometimes there's a line out there waiting for it. All right, we're going to continue on to the next shop now. We're going to start down this end. Okay, so what are we buying in for material? We're buying in both Western red cedar or Eastern white pine. Those are the species that we offer, and they can be used either for a log or a panelized home. We've got some material here that you can see is squared off, and this has not been milled yet. We buy in cants from select mills. We're not a sawmill ourselves. We buy from select sawmills. And the main reason for that is that we can buy what we want. We can buy the quality that we want. Sawmills are buying in logs. You don't know what they're going to look like once they're milled. There's a lot of slab wood and waste that's coming off of those, so we don't even have to deal with that by buying the cants in direct from sawmills that have already dealt with that for us. We buy in material both green and kiln dried. We rent kiln space in Cortland, so any of the timbers that we're buying in that have to go in the kiln, we send to Cortland. And depending on the size of the material, smaller material has to be in the kiln between 4 and 6 weeks, then the larger material between 6 and 8 weeks, depending on what it is and how wet it is when it comes in. The material that we're buying in that's already kiln dried is generally the siding material. That's a smaller material that we do have mills that will dry it for us. So as far as the process of milling, material comes in this end. It's going to be graded by the production worker here. And what he's going to be looking for is defects. If the cant is too twisted or too bent or too wet for what we're making, for what we want to put into a log, we'll actually reject that, and that'll go over further on the line and go out the door, and then we'll cut that down into other material. And we can air dry it to get, if the reason that we're rejecting it is because of moisture, then we don't have to send it back to the kiln, but we can cut it into smaller material and then air dry that. If it is good enough to run and mill, it'll run down the line here. And this machine is a 6-head planer, and we run all of our logs and square timbers on this. Beyond it is a green machine. That is a resaw machine. So we cut down material on that, but we also run our 6-inch round and 8-inch round material on that. Behind the wall here is a smaller version of this 6-head planer, and that machine we mill all of our railing and siding on. And if you take a close look in the machine, you can see on the right-hand side is the cant that hasn't been milled yet. But as it progresses down through the machine, the different heads are taking off different surfaces. So the first 2 heads are on the top and the bottom, and they're putting a flat surface on. The next 2 heads are on the side, and that's kind of where the orange elbows are. Mm-hmm. That's putting the interior and exterior faces on. And then the last 2 heads down at the end of the saw put the tongue and groove cut in the piece of lumber.
How many machines do you have?
So it starts at
This is it. We run all of our logs and timbers on this machine.
Wow.
right?
Now a house is going to take us about a day or 2 to run enough logs generally. It's a fairly fast process, really. We tend to try and run as many houses as we can. I mean, 2 or 3 houses generally is what we would like to run if we can, so we have the material ready to use when we get to that point. Once the material comes out the end, we've got 2 production workers down here who are actually going to be kind of pre-grading that timber as it comes out. In cant form, you're not necessarily seeing all the defects, but once it's milled, you are going to be able to see timber breaks or some things that would disallow that from being used in a log home. They're actually going to put a mark on the piece if they see something, and then when it gets into the pre-cut shop and they're ready to start actually cutting the logs for the house, the head sawyer is going to have a heads up that there's something in that to look for. All the sawdust that's produced is stored on the end of the barn, and we have a couple local dairy farmers who buy all the sawdust that we produce. Behind the closed door here is also our shop where we do all of our own sharpening knives. So as we're running, if there happens to be maybe a little stone has fallen down into a check in the log, or a hard knot that nicks the blade, we'll actually stop production, pull that out, sharpen, and then we can put it back in and start back up so that the finished product is up to the standards that we're shipping. The question was a turnaround time for production on a house. It depends on the size of the house, obviously, but it's going to take us a couple days to mill the logs for a house, and then it's going to take, a week and a half to actually mill the house in here. The other parts of the house, including timbers, depends on how many are in the house, but that would take 3, 4, 5 days. Take probably a day to cut the rafters in most cases. If it's a panelized house, then it's going to take a week and a half to panelize the walls as well. So as far as the processes that are taking place here, from when we start milling material to we're ready to ship it, probably looking at 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
And you do one
You're gonna
house
say
at a
like
time.
a year.
Well, not necessarily. Depending on where we're at in the stage of producing the house, because we're shipping material, we're not shipping everything all at once. So the logs are going to be going. So we may have a log house that we're working on, but then there may be a second delivery where there's siding. So it's for a different house. So we may be working on a couple different projects at once.
It's 12:30. Can you bring your guys in to start working on my house? You got a half a day.
All right, so this is our pre-cut shop where we cut the log portion of the house. Material comes in this end. The head sawyer is grading the material, and then it's going to be looking at the cut sheet that's up on the easel here to determine how best to use that log. So the log is coming in, and very few cases is it a perfect log. There may be a defect 6 foot into the log that needs to be taken out to meet grade. So the head sawyer is going to be looking at the cut sheet to figure out where in the house those 2 different pieces of that one log can be used. The head sawyer is then going to put a label on each log. The label is going to tell the production staff, but also the builder, what row, what wall, and what number in that wall that log is. So there's only one place in the house that any one log goes.
Perfect puzzle.
It is a bit of a puzzle.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to put up, really. So as we walk down through here, we're going to be seeing custom machinery. On the left-hand side, we have our saddle notch line. On the right-hand side, the button pass line. The house that we're going to be seeing is actually a button pass corner. So I'll kind of show you as we go down through here the different cuts that the machines are making. So if we happen to have a 90-degree inside corner, we're putting the 45-degree cut on the log with this saw here.
Do these just get tongue and groove attached, or are they glued, or are they nailed?
The rows, between the rows?
Yes.
There's actually going to be 2 rows of tape, GSL 2300 caulk, and then lags that are going to pull the logs together, the row between rows.
So it's glued, essentially.
It is, well, there is a caulk, it is a caulk, but the lags are really doing the work of holding it together.
Lag goes through one log to the other, or
Yes.
use a long lag and
Yeah,
go through several?
we use 3/8 by 12-inch lags, and we do pre-drill for the lags, which we'll see when we get down the line here a little bit further. This machine is putting this cut on the log. As we keep going down through, I'm going to skip this machine for a second. And come to this machine, which is going to put this cut in the log. Okay, so as the logs come down the line, the tongues will actually run all the way to the end of the log. So this cut's put in here, but there still will be tongues on this extension. Okay, so then we'll take the piece back to this machine. This machine actually has a blade that comes out and will cut the tongues off the extension of the log. The reason we do that is it's a good place if the tongues were there for water to kind of sit. So it helps shed water. It also, I think, looks better without the tongues on there. This machine puts spline grooves in the butt joints of the logs. So there will be 2 vinyl splines at each butt joint, and the log is also caulked. And then the next machine is the drill press, like I mentioned, that is pre-drilling for the lags. We do pre-stack every house that we produce and invite the customer to come in and take a look at their house during the production process and take some pictures. And you can see we've got 3 rows on the floor and then some rows behind it. Just based on the height of the wall, we're going to be stacking some rows on the floor that'll actually go on top of the house. And that'll actually amount to 12 rows. Above that, there'll be 2 or 3 more rows of logs that run over the window and door openings. Those actually have been picked up off the floor, and they're in a pack here, and there is another pack over there. So these are the top row logs for the house. Going to take a walk through and look at the house. The logs are just sitting on top of each other. They're not lagged down at this point.